Hello and welcome to this special program in which we highlight the deep-rooted relations between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Nations. And joining us today is the President of the current session of the United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, who is currently on a visit to the Kingdom of Bahrain. Hello and welcome, Mr. Abdullah.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here in Bahrain.
The pleasure is all ours. Mr. President, can you tell us about your discussions that you've held with Bahraini officials during your visit?
I've had the great privilege of meeting His Majesty, the King, the Crown Prince, and several other high-ranking officials of the Kingdom. I'm greatly impressed by the commitment of the Kingdom of Bahrain to the United Nations, the ideals that the United Nations aspire, and the great strides that the Kingdom, under the leadership of His Majesty the King, has taken in its commitment to keep up this total dedication to the ideals of the United Nations.
And Mr. President, can you tell us about the key priorities of your presidency and the reasoning of why you chose them?
Well, I term my presidency as a presidency of hope. I decided the presidency should be a presidency of hope, given the difficult time humanity has gone through in the past 1.5 years. Since the advent of the pandemic, we have seen great loss, we have seen devastation, we have seen death and despair around the world. But I also believe that we have been able to come up with a miracle vaccine in record time. This is the first time that such a vaccine has been produced within such a short period of time. We have also seen a vaccine rollout that humanity has never seen. Of course, it is in short than we expected, but this is the first time such a huge vaccine rollout has taken place. We have also seen humanity at its best. People so selflessly serving others in the front line, doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and many, many other services. This needs to be celebrated. And this gives us hope that there is a better tomorrow. I want to convey that message, that together humanity has the option of a better tomorrow. And that is what my presidency is about. The presidency is built on 5 rays of hope. Number 1 is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe that in order to recover from this pandemic, we should vaccinate the world. I also believe that we have the capacity, we have the means, we have the know-how to recover from the pandemic, to vaccinate the world. I'm convening a high-level event at the United Nations on 25th of February to galvanize momentum to vaccinate the world. Unless we can vaccinate the entire world, new variants are going to keep on coming. It is unbelievable and morally impossible to understand that some countries in the developing world, the less developed world, only 5% has been so far vaccinated. Whereas in the developed countries, we are going for the booster jab now. But I firmly believe that it is achievable to vaccinate the world. My second ray of hope is to recover from the economic challenges that we have faced during this pandemic. We began 2020 with the launch of the development agenda, targeted towards the decade of action to achieve the sustainable development goals by 2030. However, these 2 years, especially in the developing world, the achievement of sustainable development goals have been totally derailed. But I believe this is an opportunity to reset the clock so that we can start anew using more sustainable means, greener and bluer technologies, so that we would be on the right track. I think this is an opportunity. The third ray of hope is responding to the needs of the planet. We can hear our Mother Earth in pain, screaming. We are seeing extreme weather patterns. We are seeing melting of glaciers, forest fires, raging floods everywhere, on huge storms that we have never seen. We need to realize that we have no option but to come together and respond to the needs of the planet. Only together we will be able to survive. And I will use every opportunity I get at the United Nations to convene the member states to address this. I'm convening a high-level meeting in July this year, a moment for nature, to bring countries together, to take stock of what we have been able to do from September to July with 5 major conferences. So far, during my presidency, we have held the high-level dialogue on energy. We have held the COP26 in Glasgow. We have 3 more coming up. The 2 COPs on deforestation and desertification. We also have the Oceans Conference, major conference on the oceans, coming up in June. I want member states to come together in July, take stock of what we have been able to achieve, what needs to be done, and how we can do it. The fourth ray of hope is respecting the rights of all. I believe that human rights should be at the center of all our development efforts. And in that context, I'm very happy that Bahrain is taking lead in promoting human rights. The work that is being done by Bahrain should be commended. And I want to make sure that the Bahraini model of the leadership that has been taken by Bahrain on the promotion of youth and gender are in line with my focus areas. The fifth ray of hope is revitalizing the United Nations. The reform and revitalization of the United Nations is a continuous process in order to make sure that the United Nations is dynamic, that it responds to the realities that currently exist around the world. We have to continuously reform and revitalize, and that is an effort that I will undertake.
All of these factors are true sources of hope and inspiration. And you spoke about vaccination and their importance. And you made COVID-19 recovery the main factor for your presidency of hope. How did the Omicron variant affected those factors?
Well, when I took office, the United Nations have been having only virtual and hybrid meetings. At the General Assembly, we were only 1+1 that could be allowed because of the challenges of the Delta virus. But I was able to have a successful high-level week in September, attended by over 100 heads of state, heads of government, and high-level delegations. I started opening up the United Nations, increased the number of delegations who could be present at the General Assembly from 1+1 to 1+3, opened up the rest of the committee rooms, invited the civil society to come back in-person meetings were started. However, in January, Omicron hit us like a brick in New York, and we have had to go back to more limitations. I'm hoping that with increased vaccination, we will be able to start opening up again, because there is no alternative to diplomacy than face-to-face meetings. Of course, it's easier to talk virtually, but the human touch, which is so essential in diplomacy, cannot be replaced.
Mr. President, during your visit, you have held meetings with the Secretary General of the Supreme Council for Women and also with the Speaker of the Representatives Council, who is the first woman to assume this role in Bahrain. Can you tell us about these meetings and how do you think Bahrain is faring in terms of gender equality at the global level?
I just finished my meeting with the Secretary General of the Supreme Council on Women, and I commended the Secretary General on the initiatives that have been taken. And I must say that I salute the great work that has been done by Bahrain in promoting women's rights and to achieve gender balance. I have two young women diplomats who have been seconded by Bahraini government to work in my office, and they have done proud to Bahrain. The commitment, their high performance is commendable. One of them, Ms. Futoon, is traveling with me. She is the trip captain of my visit. And Ms. Farial is in New York at the moment, working on important assignments. They are both young and dynamic people. I also understand that 75% of Bahraini health workers, frontline workers, are women. Their selfless service to humanity is commendable. I met a number of women, outstanding women, diplomats and people who are working in other areas of work in Bahrain. Their professionalism, their knowledge, and their commitment to international the promotion of goodwill around the world has inspired me. Overall, the leadership of His Majesty, the King, has really put Bahrain on the right track. And I commend His Majesty for his outstanding leadership.
It is no doubt that women in Bahrain are playing a vital role in shaping up the Kingdom of Bahrain.
I also met the Honorable Speaker yesterday and congratulated her on being the first woman speaker. I shared with her my experiences as Speaker of Parliament in the Maldives, and it was good to catch up with a speaker, a woman speaker, who is so dynamic and who is totally committed to the promotion of democracy and good governance. It was a breath of fresh.
You have also met with the UN Resident Coordinator and the UN country team in the Kingdom of Bahrain. How do you think Bahrain is faring in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, the UN country team is the face of the United Nations, who deal with the people that the Charter speaks about. We the peoples, the first two words of the Charter. The country team relates to and puts out and implements the decisions of the United Nations. The relationship between the Bahraini government and the country team is extremely good. They work very closely with each other, complementing each other's work. And once again, I thank the state of Bahrain for the cooperation, level of cooperation that it is extending to the UN country team here. You are doing extremely well on the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, and I wish all the best.
And last question, Mr. President. What do you hope to achieve from your legacy of your presidency of hope?
I wish that the element of hope that I have been able to bring in will not die. Without hope, there is no future. Without hope, there is no way forward. Without hope, there is nothing for people to look forward to. Hope is what gives humans the desire, the inspiration to work for a better tomorrow. And that is why I have instituted a Fellowship of Hope for young diplomats and civil servants from underdeveloped, underrepresented countries to work in my office. I have 8 such young men and women currently working under this Fellowship of Hope. It is my hope that these young women and men would take that message of hope around the world. It is my desire that during my travels and the messages that I'm sending out to so many people around the world will inspire them to strive for a better tomorrow. And it is my hope that the legacy of the Presidency of Hope will not end with the 76th session, that the United Nations will continue to flame the light of hope throughout the world.
This has been truly inspiring, Mr. President. Thank you so much for being with us.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the end of this special program. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.